Good morning, everyone. Today we will be talking about disaster plans. What exactly is a disaster plan, and is it man-made or only natural? I am sure that we all have our own ideas of what a disaster is. My teenager would say that her gas tank being low is a disaster. Ha! But in all seriousness, a man-made disaster stems from acts of terrorism in most cases. 9/11 and the Boston Marathon bombings are recent prime examples of man-made disasters. Each of these events caused mass destruction and mass injuries that caused an influx of patients to hit all area hospitals. Triage was performed on the scene at the Boston Marathon bombings, as well as hundreds of people being rushed to area hospitals. People were dispersed by the hundreds and thousands during 9/11 to various facilities that in turn caused panic for loved ones that had no idea where they were. Natural disasters come in many different shapes and forms. Examples of natural disasters include tornadoes, hurricanes, floods, tsunamis, earthquakes, landslides, forest fires, and even volcanic eruptions. One of the most traumatic and recent natural disasters to hit the United States was Hurricane Katrina. Thousands upon thousands of people were displaced, homes were destroyed, documents and records were lost forever, and the injured were sent to hospitals that had no way of gathering a history of these people. Hurricane Sandy most recently caused similar damage, but in all honesty, Sandy still pales in comparison to the damage from Hurricane Katrina. Katrina spawned the new systems and laws that are now in place and are shifting all medical records from paper to electronic. Medical facilities have almost always had some version of what they consider a disaster plan. However, due to laws changing and certifications needing to be met, the road to a good disaster plan is much lengthier than it was in years past. So what exactly is a disaster plan? In today's discussion, we are focusing on medical facilities and their disaster plans. Other businesses of all types and genres also have disaster plans, but the need for medical facilities to have them seems much more inherent with all of the changes that are happening to our world, the climate, and most of all, our weather patterns. A disaster plan needs to be well thought out and planned meticulously. These plans are filled with information that will assist the facility in making decisions and implementing the plans laid out during disasters that cause damage to a large portion of the community. Successful planning will include topics such as power outages, staff shortages, massive influxes of patients, destruction of equipment, loss of water supplies, structural damages, and many other scenarios. There is no level of creativity that is beyond the scope of what needs to be discussed in these plans. After all, before 9/11, did America really think they would ever be attacked and lose thousands of lives in one day and have thousands more injured and in need of immediate care? No. But times have changed, terrorists are far more creative, and natural disasters are happening more frequently than before. Having the ability to fall back on plans during times of panic and crisis is a must. What are the top items that are to be considered when creating a disaster plan for a medical facility? First, there needs to be a plan in place to coordinate those who will be responsible for the safety and care of those who have been affected by the disaster. Second, the facility needs to be able to provide the best possible care to the highest number of patients possible during an incident. Third, it is imperative that information is shared between government, state, and local agencies. This will also assist in information getting to people who need it, such as law enforcement being equipped with the proper knowledge of where to send people, how many people a facility is capable of handling at any given moment, and things of that nature. Fourth, patient and resource tracking is a must. We witnessed the downfall of what happens when this is not the case during Hurricane Katrina. Medications and medical supplies were short, and there was confusion as to what was needed and where. This jeopardized many lives and people that were waiting on specific items to be used in order to assist specific patients. Last, credentialing systems must be met through having a sufficient disaster plan. Without a disaster plan, hospitals are not able to meet the requirements that are needed. The negative to this is that some facilities haphazardly throw together their version of a disaster plan in order to receive credentialing. In my opinion, there should be even stricter rules and regulations about the manner in which facilities receive credentialing when it comes to disaster plans, as well as other areas for the process of credentialing. How exactly does a disaster plan begin, and who creates it? A disaster plan begins with massive brainstorming by a committee of people chosen to work diligently at creating a manual for their facility to follow in many different scenarios. The committee should rotate out its members often in order to avoid complacency and to ensure fresh ideas. A good base for a committee should include individuals from each of the following areas: medical staff, administration, OR staff, nursing staff, emergency department, security, communications, public relations, medical records, admissions, engineering and maintenance, laboratory, radiology, and respiratory therapy. The committee should not be limited to these areas of expertise, but should include at least one member of employment from each area. If one looks closely at each of these areas, it is easy to imagine why they would offer such sound advice towards building a proper plan. Medical staff is always the obvious choice, but it is easy to forget the importance of maintenance and even those who prepare the simple things like food. Without every detail being covered, a facility is opening itself up for failure during times of disaster. What exactly should a committee be looking at once they have been formed? What types of questions need to be answered? Examples of these questions include, but are not limited to: does the property have a well or emergency source of water? How many emergency generators are there? Is triage available outside of the building, and is there a power supply for this triage unit, and is it available for mobility immediately? How will food and water be rationed and prepared? How will communication be performed, on-site and off-site? Are there radios, satellites, batteries? Are there enough supplies for at least 72 hours? This time frame may seem short, but it is given because we are assuming that in the event of a disaster, aid will come from other areas unaffected in a quick manner. However, one needs to take into consideration that a facility may be hard to access for a time period. Has an evaluation been performed of where the staff resides and their availability during different scenarios? This may seem like an invasion of privacy to some, but if one thinks about it, a good example would be if there was a flood and a mass number of employees were living in low-lying areas, the facility is obviously going to be short-handed. If employees are located on higher ground, then it needs to be documented so that preparations can be made to ensure the highest number of employees are able to come in as quickly as possible. Are the needs of the Joint Commission and the Community Health Accreditation Program being met? If not, then the plan needs to be revamped and dealt with immediately. A facility is responsible for its own disaster plan and implementing it. However, a facility also needs to partner up with others to ensure quality and care for as many people as possible. Hospitals need to partner up with one another as well as with urgent care facilities, home health care agencies, fire departments, and local law enforcement agencies on each level. Vendors for items such as medications, food, water, medical supplies, and added transportation also needed to be partnered with. All parties involved need to read, sign, and have contracts witnessed to protect themselves during these times of disasters. We have all learned through life that if things are not in writing, then someone will always be left holding the bag and patients will be left at risk in these situations. Staff of all facilities involved should be aware of the plans and the contracts that are in place. Education of disaster plans is very important because when a disaster happens, panic from every direction is easily widespread throughout any facility. Should disaster plans be so intricate and detailed that they cannot be understood? No. While intricate, it still needs to be easily read by anyone from any education or background and easily understood. In other words, a neurosurgeon and a janitor should both be able to understand the basics that are covered in the manual. The plan should include as many scenarios as possible in order to offer guidance during almost any situation. An easy remedy is to include checklists in the plan or manual so that anyone can easily follow along and ensure that specific steps have been taken. Common sense will play a role in a disastrous situation, but we have to consider the emotions that will be highly vamped up and the inability of people to think clearly and make logical decisions on their own without guidance. I know that for myself, my mind would wander and worry, and in a situation on this level, a checklist would greatly benefit me in keeping track of what needs to be done, how, when, where, and why. What happens after this disaster has been dealt with? Recovery begins on many different levels and through many different sources. As soon as possible, all assets, medications, supplies, and equipment must be inventoried and assessed for damages. Structural damages must be seen to and documented. Photographs and videos should be taken for both historical and insurance reasons. If possible, photos and videos should be taken before the disaster happens. Obviously, this is not always the case, as we do not always know when a disaster is coming. An example of a pre-knowledge would be a hurricane that has been forecasted. It would be wise for the facility to do a walkthrough with a video camera before the storm and again after the storm for comparison. The insurance plans for replacement and business interruption insurance must also be well known and documented. It is sad to say, but during times of large disasters, it is all too easy for anyone to fall victim to an insurance company trying to not pay out for many various reasons. Having proper documentation can mean the difference between rebuilding your facility and closing in many circumstances. For a disaster plan to be successful, it must include nonstop planning and drills as often as possible. Drills are a very important part of any plan. Without drills, employees are unaware of what is happening and how to react in a real circumstance of a disaster. Alarms must be tested, backup devices have to be tested and maintained, and constant preparation and diligence is the only way to ensure that a facility can come through for a patient in disaster. Drills should include all of the staff as well as the engineers and maintenance, so that each is aware of their personal responsibility in any situation. Planning and drilling is a never-ending cycle that constantly needs to be updated, exercised, rewritten to stay current, and executed to ensure the best possible responses by all people possible. To summarize this presentation, I will put it very simply. We never know what is around the next corner, and we can never be too prepared. Mother Nature has a mind of her own, and terrorists know no boundaries, and their creativity astounds me. For every precaution we take, someone, somewhere, with an evil mind is working hard to find a way around it. No matter what one's job is in the healthcare industry, safety and preparedness must always be a priority. Know your facility's plan and make note of where the manuals are kept. Hoping for the best is simply not enough. Diligence, perseverance, and knowledge are what keeps us ahead of the game of life. Please note that portions of this presentation are my own opinions and are backed up by sources that have been cited here. For more information on disaster planning, please visit FEMA's website, as they can help with planning on a small scale for your home all the way up to a large business or facility. Have a great day, everyone.